Hello there, and welcome to the planet's memory, a quiet place for soft wonder, slow science, and questions that don't need quick answers. Tonight, let's drift together into the deep hush of one of the most unsettling, beautiful possibilities we've ever considered. A question so vast it brushes against the edge of everything we know, and yet, it waits quietly in the background of our everyday lives. What if Earth is the only place where life ever happened? Not just in this galaxy, not just in this moment of time, but in all the vastness, in all the spinning stars and frozen moons and dust-wrapped planets we've dreamed about and searched from afar. What if only this one single world ever stirred awake? It's the kind of thought that doesn't shout. It hums low and ancient, like wind over stone, like tide over bones, like the quiet breath of something old, remembering itself. Before we wander further down this path, may I ask you something? Where are you listening from tonight? Are you near a city where the sky glows softly with electric reflection? Or somewhere quiet, where the stars still speak clearly? Have you ever looked up and wondered not just who might be out there, but why it is we are here? If you find this kind of wandering thought restful, if you enjoy letting the quiet parts of the universe unfold slowly around you, I'd be grateful if you tapped the like button or subscribed. It helps this calm corner of curiosity find others like you, others who crave silence, but not sleep, mystery, but not noise. Let's begin. There was a time long ago when Earth was nothing more than dust and fire. Before oceans, before air, before breath. Just rock, heat, and the long echo of forming gravity. Nothing moved, nothing dreamed. For billions of years, Earth was simply becoming without a witness. And yet, something shifted. Maybe it was in the warmth of deep-sea vents. Maybe it was in shallow tidal pools, kissed by starlight. Maybe it happened more than once in different places and only one version endured. But somewhere, in some tiny corner of a world still cooling and cracking and reshaping itself, life began. Not because it had to. Not because the universe was aiming for us, but simply because the chemistry was right, because time was long enough, because the ingredients stayed in motion just a little longer than usual. And from that first breathless moment, whether it was a single molecule or a self-copying strand or a chain reaction that didn't collapse, life began to fold into the stone of this world. We don't know why it happened here, or if it could have happened somewhere else. But we do know. As far as we can tell, it hasn't happened again. Not on Mars, where the rocks are silent and the wind scrapes endlessly across dust older than memory. Not on Europa, where ice locks oceans away in a cold that's hard to imagine. Not on the thousands of exoplanets we've glimpsed through telescopes. Distant, blurred, beautiful maybe, but quiet. We listen for signals. We scan for shadows. We model atmospheres for signs of oxygen, of methane, of imbalance, because imbalance might mean life. But everywhere we look, we see patterns that never danced. Carbon that never kissed water. Energy that never learned to remember itself. And so we return, again and again, to this lonely place. This blue-green world, humming with breath, swarming with movement, soaked in memory. Earth is alive not just with creatures but with time. Deep time, fossils, erosions, crashes and climaxes and slow, graceful shifts. Somewhere beneath your feet right now are stones that once sat at the bottom of an ocean that no longer exists. There are atoms in your bones that were once inside volcanoes. The oxygen you're breathing may have passed through the lungs of creatures you've never heard of. Creatures that ruled this planet long before humans arrived, and who left behind no cities, no songs, no names. Only echoes, only pressure marks in the rock, only isotope ratios that whisper of ancient climates, only fossilized silence. And still, the question lingers. Why here? Why only here? Is it possible that life is just rare? That the universe is mostly not alive and never was and never will be again? Could it be that consciousness, feeling, memory are nothing more than flickers? That most planets are like quiet books that were never opened? Or maybe Earth isn't special. Maybe it's just first. Maybe the universe is still warming up. Maybe we're the beginning of a pattern, not the end. But still, in the quiet of night, when we look up, the stars do not answer. And so we wonder, could it be that the universe has always been watching but never speaking? Could it be that our little planet is the first to whisper back? Or maybe the last, not because others died, but because they never lived. And in the spaces between these thoughts, something begins to settle, a sense of weight, of preciousness. If we are alone, even for now, what does that mean for how we care for this place? Because if Earth is the only place where life ever stirred, then everything, every leaf, every breath, every fossil, every dream, becomes part of the rarest archive imaginable. And yet, if this much can be born from silence, what else might be hiding in the layers of the stone? What else might be waiting? What else might we have already walked past and forgotten to notice? There was a time before the green, before the air turned blue, before water curled into rivers and mountains had names. A time, before breath, before anything even close to what we now call life. And yet, in that vast, early quiet, something began. Not life, not yet, just dust. Tiny specks of matter, born from ancient star deaths, drifting through the dark like forgotten memories. Alone they meant nothing, but slowly, softly, drawn by gravity's invisible persuasion, they gathered. They didn't know what they were becoming. They didn't have to. Dust doesn't dream, but it does listen. And when enough of it listens at once, the universe reshapes itself. Somewhere in a small corner of a young galaxy, these ancient pieces, carbon, iron, silica, oxygen, began to cling together. Cloud collapsed, pressure rose, and in the collapse of that silence, a world began. Not with a shout, but with a slow spiral, forming. Earth didn't start as Earth. It began as a molten thought, chaotic, searing, spinning. Not solid, not still, not yet anything that could be called home. A fireball wrapped in storms, struck again and again by leftover debris from the early solar system's violent growth. Each collision a hammer, each impact a sculptor. And through this heat, through this fury came the core. Deep within, the heavy elements sank. Iron and nickel fell inward, pulled by density and gravity's patient tug. A molten heart was born, and it beat, not like ours, not with blood, but with magnetism, with radioactive warmth, with the slow decay of time's earliest gifts. Above it, the crust cooled, jagged, uneven, cracking like drying skin. Volcanoes bled the planet's insides. Gases hissed into an unformed sky. There was no ocean, only vapor. No soil, only ash. No life, only becoming. We often imagine Earth as blue, gentle, lush. But for hundreds of millions of years, it was none of these things. It was noise and pressure, silence and eruption, time stretching itself across magma plains. And even that was a miracle, because not every planet settles this way. Some stay locked in ice. Others drift too close to their star, burning into silence before they ever begin. Some never gain atmospheres. Some never cool. Some are flung into the dark, untethered, lost before they can even try. But this world, this Earth, it lingered. It balanced. Just close enough to warmth. Just distant enough from destruction. Its rotation stabilized. Its moon, born perhaps from a collision with a Mars-sized body, took its place in orbit, tugging gently at oceans that didn't yet exist. The atmosphere thickened. The surface calmed. Rain began to fall. Imagine that. The first rainfall. Drops sizzling against still warm rock. Steam rising into a sky no eye had ever seen. No witness. No record. Only change. And slowly that water carved its path. Pooled. Deformed oceans. It began to listen. Because water, unlike stone, remembers differently. Carries. It blends. It waits. And in that water, carried by mineral and heat, under pressure and light, the first ingredients for life stirred. Not because Earth planned it. Not because the universe willed it. But because chemistry, given enough time, becomes curious. But that part is still ahead. For now, we sit in the silence before the bloom. a silence older than stars, a silence shaped by fire and physics, a silence that holds no names, only temperature, gravity, chance. And in that silence we can still hear something, the hush of deep time, the breath between creation and life, the feeling that this world, this quiet, storm-born stone, might be one in a trillion, and yet somehow enough. And if so much can rise from dust, if so much can form from heat and waiting, what else, we wonder, might still be waiting beneath the layers? What else might the stone remember? Earth had cooled, but not fully. Beneath the darkening crust, the planet still churned, slow, molten, restless. A seething underworld of pressure and heat, forever moving just out of sight. It was not quiet, though it sounded like silence. It was not still, though it looked like stone. The crust cracked. It buckled. It opened its seams along the ocean floor and deep within the young continents, exhaling minerals and gases into the cold black of the early sea. And from these ruptures, something strange began to happen. Not chaos, not collapse, but structure, pattern, chemistry in motion. The surface of Earth may have seemed desolate, but beneath the waves, near the roots of volcanic chimneys, something ancient stirred. They're called hydrothermal vents. Deep fissures on the seafloor where scalding water, rich in metals and sulfur, bursts upward from the crust into the ocean's dark. They do not need sunlight. They never have. Around them, minerals solidify into strange towers, black and white smokers, rising like quiet cathedrals in the abyss. And somehow, life, tiny cells, primitive, self-replicating, startling. Organisms that feed not on light, but on chemistry, that use the Earth's own internal breath, heat, hydrogen, iron, sulfur, as nourishment. Not because it's easy, but because it's there. Could this be where life began? Not in sunlit shallows, but in the crushing dark, in places where water meets magma, and time slows to a mineral crawl. Not in warmth and comfort, but in extremes, at the edge of what seems survivable. Could it be that life first appeared not in peace, but in pressure? Still a question, still a maybe, but scientists have traced clues. The chemistry of early Earth, the structures of ancient rock, the simplicity of vent organisms, some of the most ancient lineages we know, and the possibility that even now, these vents echo the conditions of our beginning. Maybe the Earth didn't just host life. Maybe it whispered it into being. Not loudly, not all at once, but through subtle invitation, through patience, through repetition, a cycle of heat and mineral, a loop of reaction and reset, until something crossed the boundary, something held shape, something copied itself. Not perfectly, never perfectly, but enough. And that was all it needed. And if life began in such a place, in heat, in pressure, in the belly of the Earth, what does that mean for how we imagine our own roots? We are not only stardust. We are also magma, also salt, also vent and vapor and pressure-bound carbon. And when we speak of being from the Earth, perhaps we forget how literal that really is. The crust is thin, only a few dozen kilometers thick in most places. Beneath it, the mantle shifts endlessly, a current of rock so slow it moves continents. That movement drives volcanism. It renews the seafloor. It reshapes coastlines. And maybe, just maybe, it birthed biology. The Earth breathes in stone time. It expands, contracts, folds, cracks. It never truly rests. And the traces of this deep activity, though hidden, are everywhere. In the basalt under the oceans, in the uplifted mountains of ancient sea floors, in the obsidian fields left behind by long-dead eruptions, in the isotopes that whisper how old the magma was when it cooled and what it carried. Even in us, in our bones, in our blood, are minerals once suspended in volcanic gas. And so the question lingers, are we children of the surface or children of the deep? Is it possible that consciousness began not in the light, but in the dark? Not in calm water, but in boiling acid? Not in sky, but under rock? Could the Earth, long before language or land, have murmured something into being beneath its crust, and watched unknowingly as it began to grow? We don't know for sure, but we keep looking. We study the old rocks. We dive to the vents. We trace the carbon. We listen for echoes. And sometimes, in the patterns of mineral and the rhythm of cycles, it feels like the planet is still speaking. Softly, patiently, in heat and stone and chemistry. Not loudly, just enough. And if the earth could give rise to life from its own breath, if molten stone and deep time could write the first sentence of biology, what else might be hidden beneath the crust? What other stories might the heat still hold? What else might be waiting for the right moment to rise? The earth does not measure time the way we do. To us, a century feels long, a millennium almost unimaginable. But to the planet, these are only heartbeats. Its true tempo is slower, a rhythm written in mineral, a pulse carved into the deep crust. To glimpse it, we must look where time has left its fingerprints. In isotope trails, in fossilized heat, in the patient record of stone. Every rock, every grain of sand, holds a memory. Radioactive isotopes within them decay at precise, predictable rates, like invisible clocks ticking inside matter. Uranium becomes lead. Potassium becomes argon. Carbon dissolves, reforms, fades. These slow transformations tell us how old the world's layers are, how long mountains have slept, how rivers have moved, how oceans have opened and closed like breathing lungs. In this way, geology becomes the planet's diary, one that never forgets, even when its pages are buried. Each mineral is a date, a pulse, a quiet witness to what once was. To hold a piece of ancient zircon is to touch something that has seen 4 billion years pass, to feel in your hand a fragment of the Earth's earliest memory. The oldest of these minerals are not only clocks but mirrors. They reveal what the planet once felt like, the heat it carried, the chemistry of its air, the pressure in its depths. Some isotopes whisper of volcanic fury. Others hint at the first rains, the first oceans condensing on molten crust. In these chemical signatures, the story of time unfolds without words. And yet, this clockwork is not mechanical. It is alive, not in a biological sense, but in its movement, its rhythm. Continents drift like thoughts, slow and deliberate. Over millions of years they collide, break apart, reform. Mountains rise, erode, and rise again. The seafloor is born from fire, slides beneath another plate, and vanishes, recycled into the mantle like a memory retold too many times to stay pure. It's strange to think that the ground beneath us is always moving, that even as we sleep, the continents shift a few centimeters each year. And stranger still that this slow motion is what has shaped everything we know. The placement of mountains, the course of rivers, the breath of climate. Without this movement, there would be no weather, no recycling of carbon, no renewal of soil. Life depends on a restless crust. Deep time has its own language. It speaks through pressure and isotope, through erosion and uplift. It reminds us that nothing is permanent. Not rock, not ocean, not even sky. What feels eternal is only patient. What feels still is only slow. And within that slowness lies a kind of grace. Because when we look at the timeline of the Earth, not in years or centuries, but in billions, something in us softens. The urgency fades. The noise quiets. We begin to sense the vast continuity of things, the way all events, all eras, flow into each other like sediment into the sea. Even extinction, that most final of words, is, in deep time, just another transition. Life collapses, yes, but it returns. Always in new forms, shaped by the Earth's quiet hand. The continents forget and then remember. The climate resets. The story rewrites itself. And perhaps that is the secret hidden in the rocks. Not just how long something has lasted, but that it has lasted. Against heat, against collapse, against the dark pull of entropy. The world endures by changing. When we trace isotopes or carbon dates, we are not only studying chemistry, we are listening. Listening to the planet keep time with itself. Listening to the slow tick of matter becoming memory. And in that listening, we might begin to feel something familiar, a reflection. Because just as rocks decay into new forms, so do we. Our bones, our thoughts, our histories. All will dissolve into the same elements, into the same quiet clock that never stops turning. And if the earth remembers through its stones, maybe we, too, are part of that memory, brief, luminous, recorded in mineral, in dust, in silence. And yet, if every grain of sand holds the trace of time, how many memories have already been erased beneath it? How much of what once was lies waiting, still buried in the layers of the crust? Some of those memories rise again, not as voices, but as fossils. Not just bones, not just shapes, but time made solid, a breath turned to stone. We often think of fossils as things left behind, fragments, clues, the skeletal outlines of what used to be. But maybe they are more than that. Maybe they are not just what life left, but what the earth kept. An agreement silently made between biology and geology, between the fleeting and the permanent. Fossilization is not simple. It is not automatic. Most of what lives will never be remembered in stone. To become a fossil is not a guarantee. It is a rare permission, a kind of quiet miracle. Something must die, yes, but then something else must happen. A soft burial, a sheltering, a gentle absence of oxygen, the slow replacement of tissue with mineral. Water, rich with dissolved elements, must seep in and cradle what remains. Time must hold it, not for days or centuries, but for millions of years without crushing it to dust. And even then, so much is lost. The soft parts decay. The color vanishes. The voice is never recorded. Only the shapes endure, the curve of a rib, the spiral of a shell, the impression of a fern, caught forever in sediment that once drifted like mud at the bottom of an ancient sea. But in these shapes there is breath. Not literal, of course, but something else. Presence. The suggestion that this planet, long before we walked it, was already full of motion. We hold a trilobite fossil in our hand, and we are holding 500 million years. We run our finger along the ribbed imprint of a leaf, and we're touching a forest that grew when continents were in different places, when the sun rose in unfamiliar skies. We study the teeth of a long-extinct creature and imagine how it hunted, how it slept, how it raised its young in a world no longer here. Fossils are time travelers that never moved. They stayed still and the world shifted around them. They do not speak, but they answer us. With every new discovery, every excavation, the earth reveals something it once forgot. Something it hid not out of cruelty, but because it simply had no need to remember until we came along and asked. And yet, fossils are not just scientific. They are emotional. There is something profoundly quieting about seeing the bones of a thing that no longer exists. Not just dead, but vanished entirely. A species with no witnesses left. A lineage broken. A voice lost to silence. And yet here it is. Still here somehow. Still shaped. Still speaking in its way. Is it possible, then, that fossilization is not about death but about memory? Not because the earth cares. Not because it tries. But because the conditions of its slow breath, its shifting layers, its chemical habits, accidentally preserve the impossible. And if death can become stone, if once living breath can harden into permanence, what else might be preserved, hidden far deeper, in layers we have yet to uncover, in places long subducted into the mantle, lost beneath continents, melted and reformed? Could there be fossilized forests we will never see? Entire ecosystems now buried beyond reach? Traces of other creatures, other attempts at life, that left no names, only a faint mineralized outline? And what about us? We will die, yes, but some of us, a tooth, a rib, a boot, a city buried in sediment might fossilize, might remain, not because we chose it, but because the earth allowed it. Could we become a memory too? One day found by something else? Some future being, human or not, brushing away layers of stone to find our shadows pressed into the crust? It is humbling to think that death does not always mean forgetting. That, under the right conditions, even the softest life can harden into memory. And when we hold that memory, when we look at the gentle spiral of an ammonite or the delicate imprint of a dragonfly wing, we are reminded that the earth has been alive for a long, long time. Long before us. long after, perhaps, and it remembers in its own way, not with words, not with books or songs, but with stone, with patience, with a breath that never moves, but never fades. And if even death can leave such beauty behind, then perhaps there is more to find, more to uncover, in places we haven't yet thought to look. Because if fossils can whisper, what else might the earth be trying to say? What would it say about us? And more hauntingly, what would it remember if we were to vanish? Not with a scream, not with a final gesture, but slowly, quietly, over centuries. What would survive in our absence? Not our languages, not our screens, not the shimmer of satellites or the thrum of engines. Those are soft things, fragile things. They fade quickly once we stop feeding them power. But the harder things, the plastic, the concrete, the alloys buried deep in our roads and buildings, those may linger. We call them technofossils. Not yet real fossils, not mineralized in stone, but synthetic bones, waiting. Human-made materials that could, under the right conditions, enter the Earth's geological record. That could harden into the future's memories. Think of a city left untouched, slowly drowned by climate or buried by sediment. The steel of its frame crumbling into iron-rich veins, its glass collapsing into grains, its polymers sinking into layers of plastic-laced shale. No one to see it, no one to care, just time working without witness. Would these artifacts become part of the rock? Would future geology bear the marks of us, not in fossils of bodies but fossils of intention? Circuits without context, concrete shells, mysterious shapes with no living architects. Already we leave traces. Microplastics drift through oceans and rain down on mountain peaks. Aluminum and synthetic isotopes sink into the soil. Nuclear byproducts settle into bedrock, quiet and hot, ticking their own slow countdown across half-lives longer than memory. Future geologists, if such beings ever exist, might puzzle over the sharp spike in carbon in our age, the sudden presence of rare earth metals, the strange mixture of organic and artificial compounds pressed into compressed sediment. They may wonder what we were, how long we lasted, why we vanished, or perhaps they will not wonder at all, because perhaps there will be no one left to ask. The Earth doesn't require an audience to remember. It records automatically, unconsciously. It lays down its sediment whether anyone is watching or not. Preserves the strange, the broken, the accidental. And maybe our machines, too, will settle into this process. Buried smartphones, melted plastic toys, crushed remnants of satellites, fallen and absorbed into the crust. A world's worth of trash, slowly transforming into geology. It is a quiet form of immortality, not one we chose, but one we may be given anyway. Not because we deserve it, not because we asked, but because the Earth cannot help but remember. And isn't it strange that what may last the longest are not our words, or our dreams, or our songs, but our waste? What if the most enduring trace of humanity is a layer of plastic sediment? What if the next chapter of fossilization is not bone, but polymer? Not amber-locked insects, but silicon-framed devices? Not shells or leaves, but the ghostly imprint of a vending machine? It is not a dramatic ending. There are no final wars here, no apocalyptic bursts, only erosion, collapse, moss growing where walls once stood, wind wearing down monuments until they are no longer names, only shapes, rain falling over lost machines. Maybe this is how we go, not with destruction, but with forgetting, and the Earth, ever patient, ever slow, will take our remnants and press them into the deep. Maybe one day they'll surface again, not because someone digs them up, but because plate tectonics folds them into mountains, and something finds a circuit board in a cliff face, puzzling over what it might have been. A tool? A creature? A mistake? Or maybe no one finds them. Maybe they remain there, silent, part of the rock, as unnoticed as trilobites once were, waiting, sleeping, becoming less strange with each passing eon. And yet, if our machines can turn to fossils, if our presence can be remembered not in flesh but in fragments, What does that mean for how we live now? What does it mean to leave behind a memory we never meant to create? And if the earth will remember us anyway, should we not try to leave something more than bones? Something kinder? But earth does not choose what it remembers. It remembers everything, even the endings, especially the endings. For in its deepest layers, pressed into stone, baked into clay, and sifted into sediments, there is dust that once was fire. Not ordinary fire, but planetary fire. The kind that swallows forests, silences oceans, darkens skies for years. The kind that does not stop when the flames go out. We call them extinction events. We give them names like punctuation, the Ordovician, the Devonian, the Permian, the Cretaceous when the dinosaurs fell. They sound distant like chapters in a book we've never read. But Earth remembers them intimately, not with grief, not with sorrow, but with layers. A thin band of iridium, rare on Earth but common in asteroids, lies buried like a fingerprint around the world, a quiet boundary between life before and life after. Scientists found it in Italy, in Denmark, in New Zealand, in rocks the color of old parchment. That thin layer is not thick, only a few centimeters at most. But it speaks of a fire that circled the globe. 66 million years ago, a rock fell from space. It struck with such force that it vaporized stone, ignited forests across continents, and filled the air with soot and sulfur. The impact itself was seconds long. The memory remains. Beneath that iridium line you find the teeth of dinosaurs. Above it they are gone. Extinction is not just absence. It is transformation. Entropy, left unchecked, pulling order apart. A sudden spike in heat, a drop in oxygen, a chain reaction in ecosystems so delicately balanced. A single missing link sends them all collapsing like bones turning to dust. And yet, the dust persists. In every major extinction, whether caused by asteroid, volcano, or climate swing, the Earth leaves a signature. Ash falls like snow and settles into lakes, where it becomes shale. Carbon isotopes shift, their ratios changing in ways that say something burned, something died, something tipped too far. And long after the bodies rot, the signal remains. We sometimes imagine that extinction is the end of life. But it isn't. It is the end of some life. The clearing of a chapter. The Earth always keeps writing. After the Permian extinction, the worst in known history, when 90 of marine species vanished, the seas slowly refilled. After the forests turned to coal, new ones grew from their ashes. After the sky dimmed, it brightened again. Entropy doesn't stop time. It just rearranges it. But in that rearrangement, something is always lost. Entire lineages that had spent millions of years evolving simply ended. No fossils, no memory save for their absence, and the heat that erased them. So the question lingers. Does the Earth remember heat? Can it hold the signature of destruction in its stones? Not just what was lost, but how it was lost. Scientists think so. In rocks they find charred pollen, soot trapped in glaciers, mercury in sediment, ash that settled on the ocean floor and hardened into slate. These are not ruins. They are residues, ghosts of fire. And when we study them, we are not looking at tragedy. We are looking at change. At entropy not as decay, but as reorganization. Planet turning its own pages. Still, there's something haunting in knowing that so much life can disappear, and all that remains is a chemical smudge, a shifted isotope, a line in the rock no thicker than a fingernail. That's how Earth remembers. Without story, without language, only with dust. And if all we leave behind is a layer burned plastic, a spike in carbon, a sudden strange mineral that marks our age, will that be enough? Will we become just another scar in the stone? Just another fire, remembered only by the ash? And if that's true, what else might lie buried beneath our feet? Unknown, unrecognized. Entire worlds, entire eras, that ended in heat and fell into silence. Perhaps Earth's memory is not written in a single story, but in a pulse, a rhythm of rising and falling, of breath held and breath released. Not just fire, but also ice, Because the planet does not stay still. It breathes in long, slow cycles, warming, cooling, expanding, retreating. Not with precision, but with persistence. A breath so vast it takes tens of thousands of years to complete. Yet it beats, steady and strange, beneath the patterns of extinction, beneath the birth and death of forests, beneath the oceans that come and go like slow-moving tides. We call them climate cycles, glacial and interglacial, but that word is too small, too sharp. It doesn't hold the softness, the slowness, the deep hum of the earth turning toward cold, and then again toward warmth. There have been ice ages where glaciers sprawled across continents, carving valleys, grinding stone to dust. Thick walls of ancient ice sliding forward inch by inch, reshaping the land not with rage, but with weight. And then, the retreat, the melt, the thawing of silence. Forests reclaiming what ice abandoned. And then again cold. And then again fire. This cycle is not random. It is written in the tilt of the Earth's axis, the shape of its orbit, the wobble of its spin. These slow movements, called Milankovitch cycles, shift the way sunlight touches the planet. Not much, just a little, but over time that little becomes enough. A slight tilt, and summers grow gentle. A stretch in orbit and winters grow long. Ice begins to grow. Then, eventually the pattern reverses. Heat returns. And life follows. Retreating, returning, migrating, evolving, adapting. It is in this ever-shifting balance that life became what it is. Not in a single moment, but in repetition, in pressure, in response to fire, to frost, to drought and flood, and the shifting edge between survival and extinction. And perhaps, just perhaps, this breath is what makes Earth unique. Not because it's gentle, but because it changes. Other planets may burn forever, or freeze without end. Mars lost its atmosphere. Venus never cooled. But Earth pulses. It inhales and exhales climates. It forgets and relearns how to be warm, how to be cold. And life, pulled along by this rhythm, became not just resilient, but complicated. Coral reefs that grow in shallow warmth and die in cold. Mammals that burrow through snow, then re-emerge when the thaw returns. Trees that remember when to drop their leaves, when to hold them close. And us, shaped by firelight, by the scarcity of winter, by the bounty of summer rains. We live inside this rhythm. We build our cities in its interglacial pause. We plant our crops in the space between ice's retreat and fire's return. We are, in many ways, children of this breath. But what happens when the rhythm breaks? What happens when flame returns too soon, or the ice never comes? What happens when we forget that Earth is not stable but cyclical, not still but always changing? Even now, the ice speaks. In its layers, it records ancient air, bubbles trapped in silence, holding the breath of mammoths, of early forests, of volcanic winters. We drill deep into glaciers and the past exhales. We read the record like a diary. Methane, carbon dioxide, pollen, dust. Each one a page in a story we're still writing, still trying to understand. And as we warm the Earth, faster than ever before, we're pressing hard on that story, bending it out of shape, adding new variables the planet has not seen in millions of years. We are not outside the cycle. We are part of it, but we are pressing on its chest, interrupting its breath. And the Earth will respond. It always has, because the breath of ice and flame is not a choice. It is a law. And in that law, written across continents and eons, is the memory of a planet that survives by forgetting and remembering in turn. So we ask again, was it this breath, this cycle of freeze and burn, that made Earth capable of life? Or was it life itself that gave rhythm to the breath? And if the cycle is broken, what new shape might memory take? Perhaps the answer lies not in stone, not in ice, but above, suspended in the air we rarely notice. The sky, so vast, so ordinary, so easily forgotten. And yet, Earth's atmosphere is anything but typical. We live inside a strange bubble, a transparent skin wrapped around the world, delicate and impossibly thin. It shields us from radiation. It carries warmth and wind. It lets light in just enough and holds heat close just barely. But most curiously, it breathes. And that breath is not accidental. If you were an observer floating far away, not human, not bound to any world, and you looked across the black quiet of space, scanning planet after planet, you might not notice Earth at first. A small world, blue and white, spinning quietly among millions. But if you looked closer, if you peeled back the clouds and read the air, you would find something peculiar. Oxygen. A lot of it. More than should be there. Because in the cold math of chemistry, oxygen is restless. It likes to bind, to react, to vanish into rock or rust or flame. A stable planet should lose it over time. But Earth doesn't. It replenishes. And that, to any watcher, would be a puzzle. Because oxygen at this scale is a signature. A footprint. A glow left behind not by fire or impact, but by life. Specifically, by photosynthesis. Tiny organisms, long before trees or flowers, learned to split water and capture sunlight, releasing oxygen as a byproduct. At first, it poisoned the world. But slowly, across eons, the atmosphere changed. Life shaped the sky, and the sky, in turn, made life possible. Now, every breath we take is a continuation of that gift. We do not just breathe air. We breathe history. But outside of Earth, the silence continues. Mars has an atmosphere, yes, but thin and choked with carbon dioxide. Venus has one too, dense, hot, hostile, full of sulfuric clouds. We have scanned hundreds of exoplanets, reading their spectra, hoping for a hint of imbalance, a chemical contradiction that might mean life. So far, the readings are quiet, balanced, empty, and so our sky remains alone. An anomaly, a signal that no one seems to answer. Could the universe be watching? Could something, somewhere, peer down at this oxygen shimmer, confused, curious, or perhaps quietly mourning? Because if Earth is the only planet with this kind of sky, what does that mean for the rest? Are other worlds waiting, or did they never have the chance? The sky holds fingerprints, but it also holds time. Trapped in ancient ice cores, we can read the atmosphere's past. Its fluctuations, its collapses, its revivals. We see the breath of forests, the sigh of volcanoes, the sharp gasps of extinction events. Even our own touch is now recorded in rising carbon, in shrinking ozone, in a warmth that won't quite leave. We are changing the sky, even as it holds us. And if one day we are gone, quietly, completely, the atmosphere will shift again. Oxygen levels may fall. Balance may return. The shimmer may fade. And the universe, if it watches, will see that too. A brief pulse, a chemical flicker, a memory. Because this atmosphere is not just gas. It is story. It is signal. It is the breath of a planet that somehow became aware of itself. And maybe, just maybe, it is Earth's way of calling out, not with sound, not with message, but with presence. With color. With composition. With a sky that should not exist, but does. And if that is the case, if the sky is a form of speech, then who is listening? Who is left to notice? Or are we speaking only to ourselves, under a sky that watches not with eyes, but with time? There's a question that lives quietly inside many of us. It doesn't rise often, but when it does, it lingers. It's older than modern science, older even than language. It goes something like this. Where is everyone? If the universe is so vast, and stars so numerous, and planets so plentiful, why does it feel so empty? This question, so simple, so quiet, has a name. The Fermi Paradox. A tension between what should be and what is, between the mathematical likelihood of others, and the deep silence we continue to meet. Billions of galaxies, billions of stars within each one, planets beyond counting. And yet, here we are waiting, maybe not actively, not always, but somewhere inside us, the waiting hums. A soft hope that we are not the only story being told. And yet, what if we are? What if we are not just alone now but always were? No visitors, no signals, no ruins scattered across ancient star systems. Just dust, just gas, just gravity and silence. Not because others are hiding, not because they've perished, but because they were never there to begin with. It's not a sad thought. Not necessarily. But it is heavy. Because if we are the only life, the only conscious flicker in an ocean of black, then everything we do, every choice we make, every mistake, every kindness matters more than we can understand. And if that's true, then the Fermi Paradox isn't just about the absence of the other, it's a mirror. A quiet one, held up not to show what's missing, but to reflect who we are. We search the skies for signs, but maybe the search itself says more than we realize. Maybe we're not just looking for company. Maybe we're looking for reassurance, for proof that intelligence isn't a fluke, that curiosity doesn't end in self-erasure, that we are not too fragile to endure, because deep down we wonder, if others had come before us, with radio waves, with cities, with dreams, where are they now? Why did they not last? Or, did they never start? Some scientists believe life is likely, but complex life, intelligent life, may be rare. Perhaps the leap from single-celled organisms to minds capable of wonder is steeper than we imagine. Perhaps Earth got lucky. Or perhaps luck had nothing to do with it, and it was time, billions of years of climate cycles, of tectonic patience, of mass extinctions that cleared the way for something new. Others think the universe may teem with life, but we're separated not by distance, but by time. Maybe they came and went before us. Or maybe they will arrive long after we're gone. Maybe the cosmos is not empty, just quiet, because it is still waking up, still learning to speak, still waiting for its own reflection to answer back. And in the space between those maybes we drift. Satellites spin overhead, searching. Radio telescopes stretch their ears toward the stars. Space probes sail into the dark. We ask again and again, in 1,000 silent ways, is anyone else out there? So far, the answer has been nothing. Not a sound. Not a shimmer. Not a whisper of the other. But silence is not proof of absence. Silence is only silence. And yet, it shapes us. Because if we are truly alone, not just in this moment but across all time, then Earth becomes more than a planet. It becomes an exception, a singularity, the one place where atoms began to feel and matter learned to wonder. And in that loneliness, there is both sorrow and awe. Sorrow for the vastness that may never hold a conversation, and awe for the fact that in all that silence, we speak, we ask, we dream, and maybe that's enough. Maybe life, by simply existing, answers the question of meaning in a universe that offers none by default. Because even if no one else is out there, we are here, still breathing, still wondering, still looking up at a sky that never promised us anything, and yet gave us everything. And so we look, and we listen, and we hope, not because we expect to find something, but because hope is what the cosmos feels like when folded into human form. And if there is no shadow of the other, what else might we find in our own reflection? Maybe the answers don't lie above us at all. Maybe they lie below, because beneath the surface of our world, beneath the light, beneath the sway of tides and the memory of moonlight, there is a deeper silence, a darker one, not the silence of space, but the silence of pressure, of cold, of patience, the silence of the deep ocean. Most of Earth's biosphere, the region where life can exist, lies under the sea, not just in sunlit shallows, but in the abyss, in trenches deeper than mountains are tall, in places where no human has ever swum, and light has never fallen. And still, it lives. Down there, in the ink-black quiet, are organisms older than trees, microbes and creatures that do not breathe oxygen, that do not need sunlight, that feed not on photosynthesis, but on chemical gradients, the gentle tension between molecules, the whisper of energy in a place where no flame can burn. These are the extremophiles, life forms that exist in conditions that should be unlivable. They thrive near hydrothermal vents, where superheated water rich with metal and sulfur erupts from the seafloor. The temperature would kill anything accustomed to the surface. But down here in the darkness, life has written a different script. And perhaps this was the first script. Some scientists believe that this, not the tide pool, not the sunlit pond, is where life began. In the deep, near the breath of the earth itself, where minerals met water, where temperature and pressure created just enough spark for molecules to arrange themselves into something new, something that could copy, something that could change, and eventually, something that could remember. If this is true, then the ocean is not just a habitat. It is a cradle, a womb, the original room in which life first stirred, not in calm, but in chaos, not in clarity, but in mystery, not with eyes open to the sky, but blind, folded in the dark, sensing warmth and movement and energy in the walls of rock and current. And the ocean, in return, remembers. Its sediments hold layers of life, from the simplest cells to the bones of whales. Its waters carry ancient salts, dissolved from rocks billions of years old. This chemistry is not random. It is a memory made liquid. We are still trying to understand it. We send machines to the bottom. We collect samples from vents. We sequence DNA from microbes that should not exist. And what we find is not a neat beginning, but an echo. Life that doesn't trace back to us, or to anything we know, but to something more foundational, more alien, as if the deep sea holds not the past of life, but its blueprint. And if it began here, in silence, in salt, in pressure, could it begin here again? Could it begin elsewhere? Perhaps the cosmos is not silent because it is empty. Perhaps it is quiet because its oceans are sleeping. On Europa, beneath a crust of ice, there may be liquid seas. On Enceladus, plumes of salt water erupt from a frozen shell. Could they too hold warmth, minerals, gradients, and the waiting conditions for life? If so, then Earth is not alone in what it holds, but in what it became. Life may be more common than we think, but complexity, thought, memory, perhaps those are rare. Perhaps the deep ocean holds the secret not only of how life began, but why it stayed simple for so long, and why maybe it never needed to be anything else. Down here, there is no need for language, no need for light, only balance, only motion, only the chemistry of survival. And yet, in that survival something speaks, not with sound, not with signal, but with presence. The ocean has always been Earth's oldest library, and like all great libraries, it hides its most precious truths in the quietest corners. So we wonder, if the ocean remembers where we began, does it also remember where we're going? Is it possible that the last place we ever truly understand won't be Mars or the stars, but the black, dreaming depths beneath our own feet? Could the deep sea be not just our past, but the final silence of the future? If so, perhaps the story doesn't end with water, but continues in the stone beneath it, because the earth writes things down, quietly, carefully, not in words but in layers, not fast, not complete, but with patience only a planet can hold. We call it sediment, dust settling in stillness, ash falling from ancient skies, grains carried by wind and river, dropped into lakes, oceans, deltas, pressed by time, pressed by weight, until what was once motion becomes memory. Sedimentary rock is Earth's diary. Not every moment is written down, but the ones that are remain. A thin black line rich with carbon, the trace of a forest burned in prehistoric fire, a streak of clay, iron-stained and brittle, marking an ancient flood, perhaps the last breath of a vanished river, a sudden gap, a silence in the stone, where species disappeared, where a whole world blinked out. Layer by layer these pages stack, not neatly, not evenly, but consistently. They become cliffs, canyons, plateaus. We hike across them without knowing we're walking through chapters, each footstep brushing across a different era. Some layers are just a few centimeters thick, others stretch for meters, but each one speaks, not loudly, not quickly, but with certainty. They tell of seas that came and went, of deserts that once bloomed, of rain that fell so long ago its droplets are now fossilized in the dust they landed on. They tell of silence, too, the kind of silence that comes after collapse, after extinction, after the air changed or the climate slipped, or the sky went dark with ash. In those layers we find iridium, soot, shattered shells. the punctuation marks of planetary turning points. But the Earth is not trying to remember. It just does. It has no mind, no intention. Yet it holds memory in the way gravity holds us, constantly, invisibly, with weight that never lets go. And so we read these rocks. We cut into cliffs, we drill into ancient seabeds, we split shale with tools and look at the lines inside. Each one a breath, a pause, a whisper of what the world once was. It's strange how something so solid can speak of so much motion. But sediment doesn't lie. It just settles. And in its settling, it keeps secrets. Secrets about climate, the way rainfall ebbed and surged across continents. Secrets about life, how it bloomed, evolved, and disappeared again. Secrets about ourselves, the arrival of agriculture, of cities, of steel and soot and plastic now settling into new strata that future beings might one day uncover, puzzled by our brief, dense layer. Because we are becoming part of it, too. Our minds, our roads, our dammed rivers, they leave marks. Our pollution, our construction, our wars, they leave traces. The Anthropocene, some scientists call it. A new epoch, one defined by us, written into the earth whether we want it or not. And so we wonder, what kind of story are we leaving behind? Will it be a warning, a question, a pause, or just another page, soon covered by the dust of what comes next? But even if we disappear, even if every word and every building fades, the layers will remain. And the earth will continue writing with flood, with wind, with ash and bone and silence. Because earth's silence is not forgetfulness. It is observation, endless, patient observation. And in every layer, there is the faint outline of something that mattered. A feather pressed into stone. Pollen grain caught in amber. A ripple turned into fossil by the weight of the next storm. And if such small things can be remembered, what else might still be waiting to be uncovered? What else has been written, but not yet read? Perhaps, if we listen closely, we might hear the rustle of vanished leaves, the sigh of forests that once breathed the air we now borrow. Because long before cities rose, before rivers were named, before even flowers found their shape, there were forests. Vast and quiet, alien and familiar, and then gone. Not lost to fire, not always to storm, but buried, swallowed by the patience of the earth. They did not vanish all at once. It was slow, a drift downward, layer by layer of silt, ash, sediment, pressing in from above. A swamp that turned stagnant, a flood that forgot to drain, and time, that quiet companion, finished the work. What remained was no longer wood. It was stone. We call it petrified now. Fossilized. Mineral replacing cell. But if you look closely, really closely, you can still see the grain. The rings. The gesture of a branch frozen in mid-reach. As if the forest had not died. Only paused. A breath held. Some of these trees are older than dinosaurs. Forests that stood when insects were the rulers of the sky. When the air was thick with oxygen and the continents were still learning how to drift apart. They absorbed carbon. They made air. They lived and fell and layered themselves into time. And now we find them again. Not standing, but lying flat in beds of coal and rock. Because that's what coal is in the end. A forest, compressed. Sunlight turned to leaves. Leaves turned to peat. Peat pressed into black carbon by the weight of geological time. It's strange, isn't it, that we burn them now, these vanished forests, to light our homes, to power our machines, that their breath becomes our fuel, that the carbon they once pulled from the air, we now return, in smoke. The cycle turns. But the earth remembers. We see it in the seams of anthracite and lignite, in the stratigraphy of ancient swamps turned fossil, in the chemistry of the rocks where carbon tells us how hot, how deep, how long. And there are deeper layers still, not just physical but emotional, because these forests lived, not as individuals perhaps, but as systems, networks of roots, fungi, moisture, shade. They sheltered creatures now extinct. They anchored climates now gone. They shaped the breath of a world that had no eyes yet to see them. And they vanished, but not without leaving something behind. Petrified forests still stand in scattered places. Deserts now dry and windswept. Logs turned to stone, lying like bones on the ground. Trees that once whispered to wind, now silent but unbroken. And they ask us, without words, what else might one day vanish this way? What else, growing now, might harden into fossil? A rainforest? A coral reef? The last grove of a tree no longer named? We think of fossil fuels as energy, as heat, as power. But they are also memory, the fire of forgotten forests, the release of breath trapped long ago. And as we burn them, we turn that memory into atmosphere again. Carbon cycles back. The sky grows heavy. The planet responds. Because forests do not only vanish once. They vanish again and again in cycles of growth and burial, bloom and erasure. They are not just victims of time. They are part of its rhythm. And if we follow the smoke back, through layers of rock and soot and coal, we arrive at silence. At roots. At rings that once counted years no longer recorded in any calendar. And yet, they remain, still present in stone, still holding the shape of something that once gave breath. So we pause, and we wonder if forests can vanish into fossil smoke and still leave something of themselves behind. What might we leave? And who, or what, might one day read our forests in stone? Who will understand the shape of things once living? Things long buried, long silent, things that still speak in a language we are only beginning to translate. The language of lost bones. It is not a language made of sound. It does not use grammar or syntax. There is no alphabet, no voice, no intent, and yet it communicates. We find a fragment of jaw, a curved spine, a ribcage too small to have belonged to anything we've ever known. And suddenly we see it. A body that once moved, that once grew, that once died, that once lived in a world with its own rhythm, its own rules, its own predators, seasons, hungers, migrations. Extinct lineages, whole branches of the evolutionary tree, now cut off like abandoned sentences in a story still being written. And yet, their bones remain, pressed into stone, tumbled into caves, suspended in amber, whispering of forms and adaptations that came and went before humans ever appeared. The earth, it seems, has always been talking. Not to us, not for us, just to itself. Speaking through mutation, through shape, through survival and silence, through what stayed and what didn't. And we, arriving late, press our ears to the dust and try to listen. The fossil record is imperfect. It is full of gaps, contradictions, vanishing points. But within those spaces we find a kind of rhythm, patterns that echo across deep time. We see how fins became legs, how jaws grew from gill arches, how teeth emerged in strange places, how feathers appeared before flight, and hollow bones formed long before birds ever found the sky. Every bone tells a story, but only in part. It's not always the story of triumph. Sometimes it's a story of failure, of extinction, of adaptation that came too late or not at all, of branches that grew in the wrong direction. But even those stories speak. In fact, they may be the most important ones. Because evolution does not remember with mercy. It remembers with structure, with form, with pattern and path, with trial and error, mostly error across millions of years. There are animals who no longer exist, but whose influence lives on in the shape of your wrist, in the curve of your spine, in the way your jaw fits into its hinge. You carry the blueprints of things long dead. You are not just human. You are ancient architecture recycled. And when we walk through natural history museums, looking into glass cases of assembled skeletons, we are not only looking back. We are looking inward, at echoes, at what we might have been or might still become. Because extinction is not the end of a story. It is a pause, a redirection, a branching that did not continue, but that still left traces. The bones of a giant ground sloth, the skull of a saber-toothed cat, the delicate ribs of a flightless bird the size of a man. Gone, yes, but not erased. The earth held onto them, and we found them again. Sometimes we ask why. Why did these creatures disappear? What pressures, what changes tip the balance? Sometimes we never know, but still, the bones speak. They tell us that life is not stable, that survival is not fair, that time is a sculptor who works in vast scales, chipping away, refining, reshaping, until something entirely new emerges. Sometimes what emerges is us, and so we carry their language. In our blood, our cells, our structure. In the way we dream of flight or feel awe at the sound of howling. In the way we sometimes know, without knowing how, that we are not the first. That we come from somewhere far, far deeper than we can see. And when we leave bones behind, as we surely will, they too will speak. Perhaps not to another intelligence. Perhaps not to anything at all. But the earth will hold them, just as it always has. It may take 1,000 years, or 1,000,000, but under the right weight, in the right sediment, with just enough time and silence, our bones will join the language. And maybe, just maybe, someone will read them, not to learn about us, but to remember what was once possible. And if bones can become words, what else has the earth been saying all along? Maybe the next chapter isn't written in stone, or in dust, but in ice. Because some memories do not harden. Some are preserved in a slower breath, not compressed into fossils but frozen where they fell. Permafrost, glaciers, ice sheets that stretch across continents and settle into mountain spines. These are not just landscapes, they are time capsules, shelters, sealed rooms in the long house of Earth's past. And inside them shadows, frozen mammoths, soft as the day they died, their skin still bearing the chill of the winds they once knew. Seeds from vanished plants, waiting for the warmth of germination. Ancient air, trapped in bubbles smaller than a tear, holding the breath of a planet from 20,000 years ago. Time doesn't move here. It lingers. Permafrost is not simply cold ground. It is a memory held in suspension. A soil where bones, pollen, microbes, even whole ecosystems, remain locked just beneath the surface. Not buried deep, not crushed or lost, but paused. As if the earth pressed a finger to its lips and whispered, "Wait." And the question we quietly circle is this: will it thaw? Already, in parts of the Arctic, it has begun. As temperatures rise, what was frozen softens. Layers long sealed are breathing again. And with that breath comes release of methane, of long-dormant bacteria, of the scent of a forest buried for ages. Sometimes the melt reveals. Sometimes it erases. Glaciers too, once thought eternal, are in retreat. They groan. They crack. They shed centuries as they recede. Not just water, but memory. Dust from volcanic eruptions, ash from distant fires, traces of nuclear fallout, even pollen from extinct flowers, all carried within their slow, shimmering bodies. And when they melt, they do not forget. They pour their memory into the sea. Somewhere beneath the Greenland ice sheet, scientists found liquid water, hidden for thousands of years. Beneath Antarctica, there are lakes, sealed under kilometers of ice, untouched by sunlight since before humans learned to speak. Could something be living there still? Not in the way we imagine, not great beasts or forgotten civilizations, but something smaller, simpler. Bacteria, organic fragments, molecules waiting for motion. Could the past thaw into the present? Could it already be happening? It's a strange reversal to think the future might be shaped by what the Earth tried to keep still. To think that climate change might not only erase what is, but awaken what was. Not all of it will be dangerous. Not all of it will be beautiful. But all of it will be change. And some secrets, once released, cannot be returned. Still, there is wonder here too. In ice cores drawn from deep within glaciers, we read the rhythm of past climates. Warming and cooling, drought and deluge, fires and stillness. Thousands of years etched in layers thinner than paper, like the rings of trees written in water and air. This is how the earth tells time when no clocks exist. And though the surface shifts, the deep remains. For now, because the earth, while patient, does not keep its memories forever. Ice melts, lakes drain, permafrost collapses, shadows that once stood still begin to move again. And we, Uninvited and uncertain, stand in the thawing doorway. Do we dare enter? Or will the past flood back on its own? Not with myth, but with microbes, with gases, with knowledge that changes what we thought we knew. Or perhaps, the earth is not releasing its secrets. Perhaps it is slowly sealing them for good. As glaciers vanish, what they once covered becomes open to erosion, to decay, to loss. Organic matter preserved for millennia may dissolve. What could have been studied disappears. We are in a race we did not start, between revelation and ruin, between recovery and forgetting. And so we stand here, beneath melting skies, watching time loosen from its frost-bound prison. We wonder, are we meant to know these things, or are some memories meant to stay cold? Because if the past returns, what else might come with it? And what if, instead, it doesn't return at all? What if one day, the earth forgets? Not a temporary forgetting, not the loss of a city or a species or even an age, but something deeper, a forgetting that unfolds not from absence, but from time, from erosion, from silence, from the slow, quiet undoing of memory across deep centuries. What if the earth could forget it ever had life? It seems unthinkable. Life is everywhere here, in air, in soil, in the corners of stone and the tips of leaves. It buzzes and breathes and multiplies. It shapes continents, colors oceans, warms the air with carbon and cools it again with roots and rain. But still, time is long, and memory, even Earth's memory, is fragile. We've seen it already. Whole species vanished, their names unknown. Ecosystems erased so cleanly that we didn't know they'd ever been there. Civilizations swallowed by forest, desert, ocean. Their tools turned to rust, their stories reduced to myth, their language silenced not by force, but by forgetting. Now stretch that forgetting further. 1,000,000 years, 10 million, 100. If all humans vanished today, what would remain? The tallest buildings would crumble within centuries. Roads would fracture. Satellites would fall. Our books would rot. Our servers would dissolve. In a few millennia, the jungles and tides would take our cities. In a few million years, even our ruins would be difficult to recognize. Erosion is thorough. Plate tectonics is patient. Climate, over deep time, is a sculptor with no sentiment. Even stone forgets, eventually. Sediments shift. Mountains rise and grind themselves into powder. Ice advances, then retreats. Ocean floors are born, stretch, and disappear beneath subduction zones. Melted back into the mantle, their memories turn to magma. And yet, the Earth spins on. It doesn't need memory. Not to rotate. Not to orbit. Not to continue being Earth. But what does it mean if one day it forgets that it was once alive? That it once held forests and wings and language and cities? That, for a brief flash in geological time, it was conscious of itself, not just through neurons and thought, but through music, reflection, art, compassion. Could a planet lose the knowledge of what it was? Could life come and go, and be lost so cleanly that there would be no trace left at all? This happened before, perhaps. Maybe not here, but somewhere else. Maybe Mars once had oceans. Maybe Venus once had air we could breathe. Maybe another world orbiting another star once knew something like wonder, and then didn't. Maybe there was memory and now there is none. No fossils, no light, no signal, only wind, only dust, only silence. We like to think that memory persists, that something always remains, that the earth keeps a record. And it does, but only for a while. Only until the record is rewritten, until the cliff collapses, until the stone turns over and the pages are erased by new time. This is not cruelty. It's just how things change. Entropy, after all, is not just about decay. It is about forgetting. It is the natural drift from structure into formlessness, from story into silence. And if the earth one day becomes a world without memory, what will that mean? Not for us, we won't be here, but for the universe. Would it notice? Would it care? Would some distant traveler ever arrive and see only weathered rock and silent valleys, and never guess that there was once poetry here? Once breath? Once hands that reached for stars? Or maybe forgetting is part of the cycle too. Maybe planets must forget in order to begin again. Maybe memory, like soil, becomes too crowded, and only in its clearing can something new take root. It's hard to know, but the question lingers gently. Could Earth one day not just lose us, but forget it ever held us at all? And if forgetting is part of the pattern, then what might already have been forgotten? Not by accident, not by carelessness, but by geology, by the slow shift of the planet's own skin, folding, burying, pressing one moment over another until nothing remains above, only underneath. We're used to imagining ourselves as the first species to build, the first to write, the first to light the night with fire and wire and electric dreams. But what if we're wrong? What if we're only the first to survive long enough and high enough in the sedimentary record to be noticed? It's a quiet speculation, not proof, not dogma, just a wondering, the kind that doesn't shout, but waits in the background like a half-buried foundation stone. Could there have been civilizations before us? Not millions of years ago, but tens of millions, before the ice ages, before the continents took their current shape, back when Earth's climate was warmer, wilder, lush in strange ways. A time we now call the Paleocene, or the Eocene, or even deeper still. We think of those eras as ruled by reptiles, by forests, by mammals just learning to walk upright. But what if, somewhere in that vast span of unrecorded time, something intelligent rose? Something that built. Not metal, perhaps. Not digital. But something else. We wouldn't necessarily know. Because the Earth is not a gentle archivist. If a city falls today and is not reclaimed, it will erode in centuries. In thousands of years, it may vanish entirely. In millions, it would be indistinguishable from natural rock. Alloys corrode. Concrete crumbles. Glass returns to sand. Even radiation leaves only faint traces, quickly hidden by new layers. And the crust itself moves. It buckles, subducts, swallows. The seafloor is especially young, barely older than 200 million years, constantly refreshed by volcanic ridges and erased at trenches. So if a civilization once lived there, it is already gone, pressed into magma, written over, forgotten. Even land is unreliable. Entire mountain chains rise and fall over tens of millions of years. What was once a valley becomes a plateau. A coastline becomes a desert. A floodplain turns to shale. Could cities be buried deep beneath the sediment? Could we have already drilled past one and never noticed? Some scientists have asked this in a formal way, calling it the Silurian hypothesis, named not for its age but for a fictional species in science fiction. It's not a claim. It's a test. What evidence would a truly ancient civilization leave behind if it rose and fell before us? Would it change the isotope ratios of carbon in the rock? Would it spike the temperature record? Would it leave a strange layer of synthetic molecules, technofossils, durable enough to outlast the turning crust? In our own time, we are leaving such signals. Plastics, nitrogen from fertilizers, carbon from fuel, traces that may linger for millions of years, or disappear in a fraction of that, erased by the same pressures that remove mountains. So if we're leaving only faint scars, what would be left of something that came before? Maybe nothing. Or maybe just a hint, a geometric anomaly beneath a desert, a strange alignment of quartz beneath the sea, a whisper in the magnetic layers of a long-dead ocean basin. And maybe we're not meant to know, because not every story survives. Not every structure becomes a ruin. Some become nothing at all. But still, the wondering hums. If the Earth has forgotten others, then what are we really standing on? When we build new cities, we dig foundations. When we lay roads, we scrape layers. When we mine, we descend into rock that once held forests, seas, creatures we've never named. What else might it have held? Not myth, not fantasy, but something real, simply buried. And the deeper we look, the more we realize. The ground beneath us is not just support. It is a story, and some chapters are sealed in stone, but others never get written at all. Because not everything leaves a mark. Not every presence becomes a fossil. Not every voice survives the pressure of time. And some things, no matter how deeply they mattered, vanish without even a trace. Like identity. Who are we, when even that erodes? We name ourselves with such certainty. With culture. With language. With memory. We draw lines between self and other, past and present, here and gone. We imagine ourselves as permanent beings, moving through a changing world. But what if it's the other way around? What if we're the ones who change, not just in body but in mind, in meaning, until even we no longer recognize the person we once were? There are no fossils of thoughts, no imprints of love, no mineralized versions of fear, of hope, of the strange internal weather that makes a person feel like a person. These things dissolve faster than bone. They live in the soft matter, in language, gesture, story. They flicker and fade before the stone ever begins to press down. And so we ask, is anything of the self permanent? Or is even that subject to entropy? Species rise and fall. Civilizations build and forget. But deeper still is the erosion of the individual, not just in death, but in life. We forget our own childhoods. We lose the names of those we once loved. The ideas we once held tightly soften, change shape, fall away, like cliffs worn by waves. And yet, somehow we still try to be remembered. We leave behind signatures, journals, photographs, voice recordings, footprints in the sand. But these too wash away, and even the ones that last, stored on stone or silicon, will one day fade. There is no fossil of consciousness, no museum for what it felt like to be you. Even the words we're speaking now, quiet in your ears, will vanish once the sound fades. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the self was never meant to be preserved. Maybe we are not stone but smoke, meant to rise, meant to pass through, meant to light the sky briefly and then vanish. But then what does remain? A few bones, if we're lucky. A tool, a structure, a layer of ash. But more often, nothing. No fossil. No evidence. Just the ripple of influence, how one moment led to another, how one thought shaped the next. A story without a traceable narrator. So perhaps the self is not the thing that lasts. Perhaps it's the space the self once held that echoes. The way an empty shell still shows the shape of what once lived there. The way a hollow in the rock hints at the root that once grew. And if we are brief, if we are memory made of mist, does that make us meaningless? Or does it make us rare? Because nothing that's soft should survive even this long. And yet, here we are, still wondering, still reaching backward through time, trying to feel what cannot be touched. Still whispering forward, hoping someone might one day remember us. Not in form, but in feeling. Still tracing fossils in museums with our fingertips, wondering not just what those creatures looked like, but what they were like. Still asking, is anyone, anything, ever truly gone? Maybe that is the fossil of the self. Not a bone, but a question. And perhaps we've been asking it not just in thought, but in signal. Because even as we vanish, softly, slowly, one name at a time, something else persists. Something non-biological. Something we've built. Waves, machines, circuits, satellites drifting in high orbit long past their purpose. Radio pulses still traveling outward from Earth, long after the words they carried have been forgotten. These are not fossils in the traditional sense. They are not mineral, not organic. They are not shaped by the Earth but by intention, designed to persist in a way our bodies cannot. Technosignatures, we call them, the ghost prints of intelligence. Evidence that something once thought, once built, once reached outward with deliberate complexity. But will they last? That depends on what we leave behind, and who, if anyone, comes after. We have already launched our voices into space. Gold records aboard the Voyager probes, etched with sounds of birdsong, human greetings, and the hum of our planet's heartbeat. They drift now beyond the solar wind, surrounded by silence so vast it makes memory feel like fiction. They were not sent with expectation. They were sent with hope, a kind of archaeological invitation, addressed to no one. And here on Earth, we leave different signs. Cities glowing at night, visible from orbit. Broadcasts that ripple outward from our atmosphere. Digital trails, dense, vast, and increasingly fragile. Undersea cables. Landfills of plastic and rare metals. Satellites tumbling into decay. Accelerators. Reactors. Glass vitrified by atomic fire. Will any of this be legible 1,000 years from now? 1,000,000? Perhaps not. Most electronics corrode. Most of our signals disperse into noise. Most digital memory is written on substrates that decay faster than paper. If a species rose in our wake, it might find only artifacts. Strange alloys, magnetic traces in sediment, a thin layer of plastic and radiation locked in the geologic record. Would they know what it meant? Could they decode a transistor? Would they understand that a machine once dreamed in zeros and ones? Or would it all seem like natural formations, odd, but meaningless? And maybe the more unsettling question is this: what if no one ever finds it? What if the technosignatures, our whispers, our fingerprints in the dust, persist for a while, then fade, never having been seen at all? A signal meant for no receiver, a story without a reader, an echo that dies before it ever returns. Because entropy works on machines too. Satellites will fall, solar panels will crack, buildings will collapse, the metal will rust, the fiber will rot. Our cloud, so impossibly full of data, will vanish the moment power fails. And what then? Perhaps a buried server in dry rock might last a little longer. Perhaps a deep vault of spent uranium, its half-life counting the centuries. Perhaps a circuit board pressed into the mud, turned fossil by accident. These are not memories the way fossils are. They are not shaped by biology. They are not soft, not sacred, but they are signs. And they may be all that's left of us. Not our bones, not our breath, but our tools. And if the future holds a different intelligence, one not yet born, one not descended from us, it may not understand the poetry. It may not care about our music or myths. It may only see structure and wonder who built it or why it stopped. Because in the absence of life, technology becomes the only language left. But what does it say? What does a dead satellite, drifting in endless orbit, mean? What does a half-buried circuit board mean? What does a signal mean when there is no longer anyone to hear it? Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe meaning isn't the point. Maybe just the act of leaving a trace, any trace, is enough. Because to build something that outlasts us is to say, however quietly, we were here, not forever, not loudly, but long enough to whisper into the dust. But to build something that outlasts us is to say, however quietly, we were here, and yet, the universe does not answer. The signals stretch outward year after year into increasing emptiness. Each broadcast weaker than the last. Each echo swallowed by distance. We listen, we wait, we hope, but still only silence. Carl Sagan called Earth a pale blue, suspended in a sunbeam, barely visible from the edge of our own solar system. A mote of dust. But what kind of dust? Stardust, yes, that much we know. Formed from ancient explosions. From dying stars that scattered the ingredients of life across time and space. Every element in our bodies, calcium, carbon, iron, forged in fire. But there's more to us than composition. Because unlike other dust, we wonder. We ask. We look up. We dream. Could it be that we are the only dust that dreams? It feels impossible, arrogant, lonely. And yet, here we are, peering into the dark, trying to understand why it never speaks back. The universe is not empty. It overflows with matter, energy, motion. Trillions of galaxies, stars uncountable, planets without names. But everywhere we look, the story seems the same. A silence that stretches further than light can travel. It is not the silence of nothingness. It is the silence of not knowing. Maybe we're early. Maybe we're late. Maybe others rose and fell before we learned to listen. Or maybe they're still coming slowly, carefully, from the other side of the cosmos. But maybe, just maybe, they never came at all. Maybe Earth is the only place where molecules paused long enough to copy themselves, where cells folded into creatures, where matter became thought, not because we are chosen, not because we are special, but because the conditions happened once and nowhere else, because a planet cooled at just the right distance from its star, because water stayed liquid long enough, because an asteroid didn't hit too soon or too late, because the dice rolled and life appeared, and maybe it never did again. That is the shadow of the pale blue dot. Not just its beauty but its isolation. If we are truly alone, then the stakes are higher than we ever imagined. This isn't just our home. It's the only home. Not for us, for anyone, anywhere. Every forest, every coral reef, every cell dividing in quiet persistence. The only examples of life in a universe that does not otherwise seem alive. Every story, every song, every question. The only dreams being dreamed. We are not just a footnote in a cosmic book. We may be the only page. And still, the silence continues. No signals, no answers. Just the quiet motion of light, the cold echo of expansion, the background hum of creation continuing without us. But perhaps silence is its own kind of answer. Not a rejection, not an absence, but an invitation to listen harder, to look deeper, to wonder more softly. Because if we are truly the only dust that dreams, then our dreaming matters more. It means we are the memory keepers, the only ones who've looked back at the stars and tried to give them meaning, the only ones who've told the universe its own story. And maybe, in the long stillness, that's enough. A mote of dust, yes, but one that remembers, one that reflects, one that, despite the odds, began to ask where it came from, and what might come next. And if silence is all we hear, then maybe it's our turn to speak. Not with noise, not with war, but with care, with wonder, with the small, fragile voice of a world that has learned how to dream, and is learning still how to listen. And if silence is all we hear, then maybe it's our turn to speak. But what does it mean to speak into a void? To build stories, songs, meaning, in a cosmos that never speaks back? What does it mean to live under the possibility that we are alone? Not alone in a room or a country or a moment, but alone in the fabric of reality itself. Alone on the only world that remembers. Alone on the only world that dreams. There's a gravity to that thought. Not the kind that pulls on bodies, but on hearts, on meaning, on the stories we tell to keep from drifting too far into silence. We may not feel it day to day. We wake, we work, we love, we lose. But somewhere beneath the routines, beneath the rivers of traffic and the electric hum of screens, that gravity hums, presses into our myths, our religions, our art. It finds its way into lullabies and poems and films. This deep awareness that something in us is seeking, and something outside us has not yet answered. Cosmic solitude is not just a condition. It is a weight. Sometimes it feels like sadness. Sometimes it feels like awe. Sometimes, oddly, it feels like responsibility. Because if this is the only world that breathes, then breath itself becomes sacred. Every tree becomes more than a tree. Every species becomes a story without a sequel. Every extinction becomes not just a loss, but a silence that echoes louder for the absence of others. And maybe that's why we build so much. Not just homes or towers, but cathedrals, telescopes, spacecraft, digital archives, time capsules. Maybe we're not just curious. Maybe we're trying to anchor ourselves to say we are here, we exist, we mattered. Because if we are alone, then we are also the only authors, the only narrators, the only voices telling the universe what it is. The earth spins in a dance no one else seems to watch. But we watch. We record. We are the witness. And in that role, as the only ones watching, comes a strange kind of pressure. A kind of weight not easily described. It shapes the way we think about time. It urges us to imagine futures. It invites us to create beauty, not because someone else will see it, but because beauty, when made, becomes a form of resistance to forgetting. Solitude, at this scale, is not the absence of noise. It is the presence of vast, unfilled space, and the knowledge that we are its only lantern. And yet, we carry this weight together. We write our names in dust. We build gardens and songs and constellations. We reach into the past and try to bring its voices forward. We imagine the future, even when the future feels unsure. And maybe, just maybe, that's what makes solitude bearable. Not because we break it, but because we share it. The gravity of solitude doesn't just press downward. It pulls us toward one another, toward the child's question, toward the scientist's longing, toward the artist's brushstroke, toward the hand reaching out not to find another species, but just another soul. Because if this is the only life-bearing planet, then every voice matters more. Every kindness echoes louder. Every small moment of wonder, of tenderness, of courage becomes cosmic in its meaning. Maybe solitude isn't emptiness. Maybe it's space to create something no one else can. Maybe it's a silence waiting to be filled not with answers, but with care. But what if that silence isn't the end of the story? What if the quiet is not empty, but pregnant? What if life, this fragile, stubborn flicker, doesn't only begin where we stand, but travels? This is the idea behind panspermia, an ancient speculation, now laced with modern science. A theory both simple and staggering, that life might move between worlds, that the building blocks of biology, or perhaps even life itself, could drift across space like seeds carried on the wind. It's not as far-fetched as it once seemed. We've found complex organic molecules on comets, in meteorites, in the cold reaches of interstellar dust. We've seen amino acids form in vacuum chambers, sparked by electricity and chemistry alone. And we know that some microbes on Earth, extremophiles, can survive the vacuum of space, the blast of radiation, the freeze of silence. So the question arises, could life travel? Could it hitch a ride on a rock, a particle, a speck of ice, flung from one world to another by impact or gravity or time? And if it could, then what is Earth? Is it the origin, the parent, the first? Or is it the child, seeded long ago from somewhere else? Maybe Earth is both. Maybe it was once the soil, a quiet harbor where wandering molecules landed and took root, nurtured by warmth and water and time. And now, perhaps unknowingly, it has become the sower, sending traces of itself outward into the stars. Every rocket that leaves our planet sheds microscopic fragments. Every impact event has the potential to eject debris into space, carrying with it dust, bacteria, even DNA. Over millions of years, that material may drift far from here. Most will vanish. Some may fall to other worlds. It's a kind of cosmic gardening, slow, blind, and impossibly patient. But if it's true, if panspermia is real, then Earth is not just a lonely cradle. It is part of something larger, a quiet galactic garden, unmapped, unseen, but perhaps not unconnected. What would that mean? It would mean that life is not bound to single planets, but to the universe itself. That biology is more like wind, moving through space, settling where it can. It would mean that every world we find might not just be an empty stage, but a place waiting for bloom, or a place that has already bloomed long ago. Maybe life is rare not because it is hard to begin, but because it takes so long to reach the right conditions, because it needs stillness, patience, soil that doesn't move for a while. And Earth, by luck or chance or quiet design, became that place, a seedbed, or a seed itself. But either way, life grew, and maybe it's still growing outward. Our machines sail into the dark. Our fragments drift. Our light ripples from the surface. Not all seeds take root, but some might. And maybe, far from here, one already has. Or maybe one will, a billion years from now, long after we are gone. After Earth has cooled or cracked or been folded back into its mantle. Maybe something will crawl from dust on a distant moon and look up at unfamiliar stars. Maybe it will feel wonder. Maybe it will dream. And maybe, just maybe, a trace of us will hum quietly in its blood. Because Earth, whether it meant to or not, may be part of a great unspoken migration. One that doesn't need ships or messages or maps. One that works through impact and chance, pressure and gravity, entropy and fire. One that says, Life moves. Not quickly, not loudly, but persistently, like seeds, carried in the void. We imagined they might find purchase. That someday, somewhere, a sprout would answer back. A signal, a shimmer, a mirror. But so far, Earth's reflection never came. And in that long stillness, we've become something else. Not explorers, not passengers, but witnesses, the only ones, as far as we can tell, watching the planet unfold. Leaf by leaf, storm by storm, extinction by rebirth. A presence watching itself, and wondering if anyone else sees what it sees. We waited for other voices, built telescopes like ears, sent signals like hands, and still, nothing. No reply, no reflection in the cosmic glass. What does it mean to reflect when no one reflects back? We are creatures built for mirroring. From infancy, we learn through eyes that meet ours. We define ourselves through contrast, through being seen. Face a response, a yes. And yet, in the cosmic sense, there is only silence. No one waves from across the stars. No one confirms that we are not alone. So we do what humans always do when the answer doesn't come. We turn inward. We turn the mirror on ourselves. But it doesn't quite satisfy, because self-awareness without reflection is a strange kind of weight. A depth with no anchor. A voice in a room with no echo. We are alone with our wonder. Alone with our grief. Alone with the beauty we see and the questions we carry. And maybe that's the loneliest part of all. Not that we are without company, but that we are without reflection. Because a reflection is not the same as a presence. It is something else. It is recognition. It is the quiet confirmation that our thoughts are not strange. That our shape is not singular. That our experience, brief and full of ache, has been lived elsewhere. We dreamed of that reflection. In ancient myths. In modern science fiction. In satellites drifting past Jupiter with golden records and songs of whales. We wanted to be found. Or to find something. Something that looked back. But what if it never comes? What if we are not only the first, but the only? What if the universe, with all its stars, holds no mirror for Earth at all? Just planets wrapped in storms. Gas giants that burn too hot. Moons of methane. Ice worlds with no voice. Places to study, but not to recognize ourselves. So we continue to reflect without reflection. To dream into the silence. To listen and record and press meaning into the pages of a story we're writing alone. And still, there's beauty in that, because in the absence of the mirror, we became artists. We made music. We built stories. We painted galaxies we'd never touch. We imagined lives we'd never meet. We made ourselves into the reflection we longed to find. And perhaps that's enough. To reflect not back, but forward. To be the first not just to see, but to remember. To make a memory of the universe from inside the only living planet we know. Because even without a mirror, reflection still matters. It slows us down. It softens our pace. It teaches us to look closer. Not just outward, but here, at the pale blue dot beneath our feet. The forests, the ocean's breath, the wind pressing gently against the grass, the silent mountains, the rising arc of a bird's wing against the morning light. We are not mirrored, but we are still surrounded. And maybe, in the absence of being seen, we are being asked to see. To become not just witnesses, but stewards. Not just inhabitants, but caretakers. Because if there is no one else watching, no one else remembering, then the memory is ours to hold. And the mirror we hoped for was always here. In the water, in the sky, in each other. And maybe that is enough. Maybe all of this, still means something, even if no one ever looks back. Could the stars be doing it already? Not with eyes, not with thought, but with light, because starlight is more than glow. It is a message not in language but in chemistry, a spectrum stretched across space and time, a thread that tells us what burns, what cools, what was born, and what has been left behind. We point our telescopes outward, and what we see is not the present. It is the past, ancient photons arriving now, after sailing across the void for hundreds, thousands, millions of years. And in that light is memory, not conscious, not curated, but real. Each star sings a composition of elements: hydrogen, helium, carbon, iron. By reading their spectra, we know what they're made of, how hot they are, how far they've traveled. We know their life stories before they die. And some of that starlight is our origin. The atoms in our bones were born in stars that lived and died before Earth existed. Supernovae that scattered the ingredients of life. Carbon, forged in stellar fire, now curls in every leaf, every lung, every thought. So in a way, we've already been seen. Not as people, not as culture, but as chemistry, as potential. The universe saw us before we arrived, not by name, but by pattern, by possibility. And when we burn our fires, when we launch our signals, when we warm the air with carbon once buried in the earth, the stars see that too. They do not think, they do not care, but they record, because everything we do changes the light, and light travels. One day, far from here, another star's planetary system may catch the faint shimmer of Earth's past, an old burst of infrared from our machines, or the subtle flicker of atmosphere out of balance. They won't know what it means, but they might ask. They might wonder what stirred on that quiet blue speck long ago, what brief warmth left that imprint in the sky. And in that wondering, maybe we will be remembered not as individuals but as a moment, as a soft anomaly, a rise in brightness, a pulse in the dark. So maybe stars do remember in their own way, not with memory as we know it, but with presence, with persistence. They hold our beginning, and they carry our signal. And even as we fade, the light continues. There is something humbling in that, to know that we were never separate from the stars, that we were always part of them, that the iron in our blood, the oxygen in our breath, the calcium in our bones, all of it came from distant suns, and that one day the atoms that make us will return, released back into Earth or into space or into another burning forge. Maybe they'll become rock, or ocean, or firelight on some other distant world. And maybe the stars, as they burn, will carry a piece of us forward, not because they meant to, but because light travels, and in that travel is time, and in that time, a kind of memory. But not all protectors glow. Some hide beneath our feet, silent, unseen, unnoticed, turning endlessly in the dark. Earth's magnetic field is one such keeper, a cradle not made of arms or stone, but of motion. It is easy to forget it exists. It has no color, no scent, no sound. We move through it without feeling a thing. And yet, without it, there may have been no life at all. This invisible shield begins deep inside the planet, at the boundary where the solid inner core meets the swirling liquid outer one, both composed mostly of iron and nickel. There, convection begins. Heat rises, currents churn, and the entire molten sea turns in slow, spiraling motion. That movement creates a dynamo, a self-sustaining field that extends far beyond the surface. It wraps the planet like a soft cloak, not impenetrable, but persistent, protective. Shaped like a bubble pressed by the solar wind, it deflects most of the charged particles hurled at us by the sun. Without this field, Earth's atmosphere could have been stripped away. The oceans may have boiled. The DNA of early cells may have been torn apart by radiation. Silence might have come before speech ever had a chance to form. But instead, life was cradled. Not because the Earth chose to protect us, not because it noticed we were here, but because its core kept turning, because its molten breath never ceased, because iron moved, and in that movement safety, like a heartbeat that never asked to be heard, but beat anyway. There is something beautiful about that the thing keeping us safe is something we cannot see, that the sky remains breathable, the ocean remains stable, not just because of biology or luck, but because deep within the planet, fire spins in darkness. And it has not stopped. Even now, the magnetic field continues its quiet work. Aurorae shimmer at the poles, visible echoes of its defense. Migrating animals follow its lines. Compasses point north because the core says so. And yet, the field changes. It drifts. It weakens. It flips, sometimes not often but with consequence. And still, somehow, life goes on. So we wonder, is the field only physics? Or is it more? Is it a kind of memory? A whisper from the center of the earth? Not sentience, not intention, but persistence. Motion that has never ceased since the planet cooled. A pulse, a breath, a lullaby for life. Maybe that's how Earth remembers us. Not through fossils, not through circuits, but through the fact that it still turns, still protects, still offers space for breath and bloom. Because even if everything on the surface changes, the continents drift, the oceans rise, the skies burn or freeze, the core spins on. And if one day it stops, what happens then? We don't know, but it's a question that lives deep in our future. For now, the whispers continue. In every aurora, in every magnetic ripple etched into ancient rock, in every quiet protection we didn't know we needed. But protection is never permanent. Even the deepest rhythms change. Even the most constant pulses falter, because entropy touches everything. It is not cruel. It is not a punishment. It is simply the nature of systems to come together and then fall apart. From molecules to monarchies, from bacteria to belief, from star clusters to civilizations. All things drift toward disorder. Not out of failure, but out of time. We see it in rust, in rot, in forgotten ruins wrapped in ivy, in the way sand reclaims a road, or silence returns to a house no longer lived in. Empires are no different. They rise slowly, often beautifully. They create stories, laws, art, monuments. They organize, they unify, they flourish. And then, inevitably, they begin to unmake themselves. Sometimes from within, sometimes from without, often from both at once. The reasons are many: resource collapse, internal conflict, climate change, overreach, disconnection from the land that once fed them. But the outcome repeats. There are always remains, but never returns. The Egyptians, the Maya, the Harappans, the empires of Rome, of Song, of Mali. All of them thought they had found permanence. None of them were wrong to hope. But the law of entropy is not written in politics. It is written in energy. Systems cost energy to maintain. Balance is not free. And over time, even the most complex structure will use more energy than it can draw in. Not suddenly, but slowly. So slowly that collapse feels like weather. Not a moment, but a shift in pressure you only recognize once the storm has passed. And still we build. We keep rising, layering complexity on complexity, technology, cities, supply chains that stretch across oceans. We depend on systems within systems. Electricity, memory, code, climate, trust. We think we're different, and in many ways we are. But entropy remains. It waits, not with malice, but with certainty. Not because systems aren't beautiful, but because nothing escapes time. Even our cells obey this truth. Mitochondria falter. DNA accumulates errors. Organisms age. Structures fail. And still we call it life. So what does that say about civilization? Maybe collapse isn't failure. Maybe it's transformation. A recycling of energy. A clearing of structure. A return to simpler states. Not always gentle, but not always final. Because from every fall something remains. Ruins. Languages. Seeds. Ideas. And entropy doesn't erase those things, not immediately. Scatters them. Lets them drift. And sometimes, something catches hold again. A new pattern. A new system. A new beginning, never identical but never entirely separate. So we wonder, is collapse universal? Do even stars collapse? They do. Massive ones burn bright, then fall inward, becoming black holes or neutron stars. Gravity so dense it forgets how to let light escape. Even the sun will one day swell, then settle into a quiet white dwarf, slowly cooling for trillions of years. Galaxies collide. Clusters drift apart. Even time itself may one day reach heat death, a state of perfect balance, where nothing moves because nothing has energy left to move with. So yes, collapse may be written into the structure of reality itself. But if that's true, then what matters is not how long things last, but how deeply they live while they do, how honestly they reflect the energy they hold, how gently they pass what they've learned to what comes next. Empires fall, but stories echo, species vanish, but ecosystems adapt. And even in collapse, there can be grace, a soft return, a loosening, a yielding to the larger rhythm, because entropy is not the enemy of meaning. It is the space in which meaning moves, and perhaps the awareness of collapse is what makes us human. Not just the building, but the knowing that what we build will not last. And doing it anyway, because in the ashes of empires, just like in the sediment of fossils, something remains. A trace, a breath, a question. What comes next? Perhaps only a whisper, perhaps only a record. Because even when systems fail, and empires dissolve, and complexity yields to silence, something remains. Something always tries to carry the memory forward. But what is memory when the libraries are gone? If all the books turn to ash, if all the hard drives flicker and vanish, if every archive, digital, physical, spoken, were to fall silent at once, would life still remember? And if so, where? Would it be in DNA? That ancient spiral, so small yet so dense with meaning. Inside every cell, coiled in silence, a code millions of years old. Instructions, patterns, histories passed not through thought, but replication. The shape of your fingers, the way a fern uncurls, the blink of a firefly, all remembered, not consciously, not like story, but faithfully. DNA is not language, but it holds knowledge. It copies itself again and again across generations. It mutates, yes, but slowly. And some sequences have persisted for hundreds of millions of years, unchanged. Whispers from creatures long vanished, still echoing in the blood of those who remain. Maybe DNA is the Earth's first library, older than parchment, more durable than ink. And if all else fails, if our servers darken, our cities fall, our monuments turn to dust, could a strand of DNA, buried in ice or amber or salt, carry forward some small seed of memory? Maybe not of us, but of life, of the pattern, of the breath. But DNA fades too. Radiation breaks it down. Heat scrambles its order. Time, even in permafrost, eventually wears it thin. So we look elsewhere, to the stones, because the earth writes things down, not in sentences but in layers. Sedimentary records, fossil impressions, isotope signatures, a mass extinction, a warming spike, a forest burned to ash, written into the crust like a diary no one ever meant to read. Even our presence, brief as it is now layered into the rock. Technofossils, carbon traces, synthetic compounds that may last far longer than the species that created them. In that way, maybe the stones are a kind of archive too, but not for meaning, only for evidence. They do not remember what it felt like to fall in love, or to raise a child, or to stare at a sunset and wonder why anything exists at all. They do not preserve thought, only shape. So we return to the question, what is the last archive? If everything that remembers us vanishes, what still speaks? Maybe it's not in cells, maybe not in stone, maybe it's in the movement we've caused, the climate we've touched, the extinctions we've accelerated, the migration patterns we've shifted, the subtle fingerprints we've left on rivers, wind, and coral. Maybe our final memory is not an object, but a trajectory, a push in the flow of time, a ripple long after the stone has sunk. And perhaps, just perhaps, the archive isn't physical at all. Perhaps it lives in the possibility that something comes after us. Not because of us, not in our image, but through the doorway we unknowingly left open. A species that inherits this planet far in the future. A traveler that stumbles across our ruins. A machine that wakes in a forgotten server, humming faintly beneath collapsed concrete, and finds something, not a story, not a clear message, but a question. an invitation, a trace of breath. Because every archive in the end is a kind of hope, a belief that someone someday might want to know what we were, might want to understand how we lived, and what we dreamed of. And even if they don't, even if no one ever reads the record, still we leave it, because to remember is to resist the dark. And to record, even into silence, is to believe that what happened here mattered. But silence isn't always what it seems. We treat it like absence, like proof that nothing is there. But perhaps we're listening with the wrong sense of time. Perhaps the universe is not silent, only slow. Not empty, just unfinished. What if we're not alone? Just early. It's easy to forget how young we are. As a species, as a planet, as a thought that only just learned how to ask itself, am I alone? If the universe were a single year, the Earth would have formed in early September. Life would have begun a few weeks later. Multicellular life in mid-December. Humans, in the last few minutes of December 31st. Our cities, our telescopes, our signals, they arrived in the final seconds before midnight. So when we search the sky, when we ask where everyone is, we're doing so not just across space, but across vast and uneven stretches of time. Maybe no one's answered yet because no one's had the chance. Because we're calling out in the first chapter of a much longer story. And the next page hasn't turned. Maybe intelligence blooms like flowers across galaxies. Rare, seasonal, beautiful, but never all at once. Maybe some civilizations rose and fell before our planet even cooled. Maybe others are still in their oceans, still gathering molecules into meaning, still becoming. And we, brief, bright, impatient, are listening in the quiet between their words. The silence may not be rejection. It may simply be waiting. And waiting, after all, is part of every conversation. Even here on Earth, messages take time. A voice shouted across a canyon waits for its echo. A deep-sea whale sings a song that may travel for hours before it meets another listener. Maybe the universe is like that. Not loud, but echoing. Not still, but stretching. And perhaps the silence is not meant to be filled, but understood. We fill it with questions, with equations and antennas and golden records, with art and story and the simple ache of curiosity. And maybe that's what makes this silence different from emptiness. It has been asked into. It holds the shape of longing. And so we keep listening, even when there is nothing new to hear, even when the data returns blank, even when the years pass without signal. Because listening is not just about discovery. It's about readiness. It's about being willing to notice when the quiet changes. And maybe one day, it will. Maybe a pulse will come through the background radiation. Maybe a single photon will carry a pattern no star could make. Maybe a child, generations from now, will decode the shimmer of a light-years distant world and find a voice that waited longer than we knew how to wait. Or maybe we'll never hear anything, and the silence will stretch on forever. But even then, we will have listened. And that matters, because listening changes us. It slows us down. It softens us. It teaches us to sit with wonder, not answers. To find meaning not in the reply, but in the asking. And if we are early, then we are laying the groundwork for future listeners. We are building the habit of wonder, the patience of observation, the legacy of hope. So let the silence speak. Let it ring like a bell that hasn't yet been struck. Let it stretch out not as absence but as invitation. Because maybe we are not hearing nothing. Maybe we are hearing the beginning. But while we listen outward, the ground beneath us continues its own quiet rhythm. A rhythm so slow, so deep, we forget to call it alive. We think of Earth as solid, as stone, as surface, as resource. But what if it is something more? What if the Earth is not just a planet, but a dreaming mind? A slow, molten thought, wrapped in crust and cloud, looping through memory in cycles of breath. It does not think like we do. It does not speak. But it moves. It repeats. It remembers and forgets, in rhythms too vast for our calendars to hold. The tides, drawn by the moon. The tilt of the axis wobbling over millennia. the rise and fall of oxygen in the air, the pulse of extinction, of renewal, of silence broken by bloom. These are not accidents. They are the earth breathing, alive in its own scale of time. When volcanoes erupt, perhaps it is an exhale. When glaciers retreat, a long-held breath is released. When forests stretch across continents and then fall to drought and fire, maybe that is dreaming, turning a page in a story too wide for us to read all at once. And if this planet is dreaming, then what are we? A thought, perhaps, a flicker in its sleep, something strange and self-aware that rose from its own skin and began asking questions it never meant to answer. We came from its dust, its rivers, its heat and minerals. We carry its ancient waters in our cells. Its iron flows through our blood. We are not visitors here. We are part of its mind. And just as we dream without willing it, looping through images, feelings, fragments of past and future, maybe Earth does too. It forgets. Whole species, continents, climates, civilizations, all erased, reformed, rewritten. And it remembers. In stone, in coral, in the carbon curve etched into the ice. The Earth dreams in loops, not lines. Its memories are not perfect, but they return, like a melody half-remembered, like a season, like a question that keeps rising with the tide. We often ask if the planet is conscious, but maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe consciousness is not the only kind of awareness. Maybe to move in patterns, to hold memory, to pulse with energy, is its own kind of mind. A deeper mind, a slower one. And in that dream we live our lives. We build and write and mourn and celebrate, thinking always that we are separate. But we are thoughts too. And one day we will be forgotten, folded back into soil, into ocean, into atmosphere. The Earth will continue dreaming. It always has. And perhaps one day, something else will rise from its sleep. Not us, not like us, but born of the same slow breath. And it too will wonder, will look to the stars, will carve symbols into stone, will ask who were they, and maybe it won't find us. Maybe it will find only a strange rhythm in the rock, a loop of warming and cooling, a spike in carbon, a thin, glittering line of synthetic molecules that don't belong. And it will know not the details but the dream. It will feel that something stirred here. Something reached, something asked to be remembered. And in that moment, Earth will remember us again. Not with clarity, not with language, but with presence, with echo. Because the Earth is not a stage. It is the dreamer. And we are the dream. Not separate from the Earth but shaped by it. A flicker in its memory. A breath inside its long, slow turning. But what if this is it? What if this, all of it, only happens once? Not just here, but anywhere. It's a thought that arrives like mist. Soft, unsettling, tender, not dramatic, not hopeless, just possible. We speak often of the vastness, of the trillions of stars, of the uncountable planets, of the math that insists we cannot be alone. But what if we are? What if life, in all its exquisite complexity, its folding and unfurling of cells and thoughts and memory, emerged once? What if consciousness, the ability to ask why, to tell stories, to love, to build a violin, to bury the dead, to stand beside an ocean and feel humbled by something larger, was a singular event? Not because it was fated, but because it was improbable. And improbability, even in a vast universe, is still improbability. Maybe all the right conditions happened here. Not because we were chosen, but because something had to happen somewhere. And maybe it happened only once. A chain of cosmic accidents. Perfectly timed impact. A rare chemical loop in a shallow sea. A long stretch of relative calm. A magnetic shield. A moon that steadied the tides. An atmosphere that didn't tear away. Maybe life's emergence wasn't a common result, but a cosmic fluke. And if so, then this moment, this planet, this species, this strange, small miracle is not just rare. It is alone. There are no others. No mirrors waiting across galaxies. No civilizations rising in sync just out of reach. No distant minds watching the same star and wondering if someone else is watching too. Only us, and this blue world, and this fragile breath of time. If that is true, then everything changes. Not in urgency, not in fear, but in weight. Suddenly, every forest is more than a forest. Every animal, a lineage of impossible survival. Every drop of water, a thread in a story that no other planet has ever written. Suddenly, Earth is not one of many. It is the only one. The only planet where atoms began to wonder what they were. The only place where sunlight became thought. The only world where the universe learned how to whisper itself into a question. It's easy to forget what that means. In the rush of life, in the screens, the noise, the worry, we forget that we are living inside something unique. Not special because of us, but because of it, because of life itself, because it may have only happened once. And it is happening now. We are part of it. We are it. So what do we do with that? What do we do if this is the only time the universe gets to try? Do we continue as if it doesn't matter? Or do we begin to live like witnesses, not just to our own stories, but to the entire experiment? Do we protect the coral reef not just because it's beautiful, but because it may be the only coral reef that will ever exist? Do we hold space for one another not because we agree, but because consciousness in any form is worth holding? Do we walk gently, not because we are weak, but because the earth has trusted us with its only language? There is no answer here, only a door, a quiet possibility, that this moment, this flicker in the dark, is all there is. That the universe will never again feel this combination of wind and bird call and bloodstream and music and laughter and grief. That this is it. And if it is, then how precious it all becomes. Not just life, but the way the morning light moves through trees, the sound of rain on rooftops, the tenderness of language, the scent of firewood, the curve of a fingerprint, the way someone looks at someone else and sees home. No simulation could replicate it. No machine could replace it. No second chance could recreate it. This is the only one, the only breath, the only dreaming stone, and you here now are part of it. So be gentle, be kind, be curious, be slow, not because there is time to waste, but because there is something in this moment that may never be again. A fragile, flickering possibility, written in carbon and light. The only dust that dreams.